Editing and special effects have been around now for over a century, and over that time many things have changed. One of the first films to ever be shown was Arrival of a Train at La Ciotat, made by the Lumiere brothers in 1895. Another film released the same year by the Lumiere brothers was Workers Leaving the Lumiere factory. This was made the same way with a single static shot that had no editing involved. George Méliès was the first known person whose films started to use editing in them. Though the editing was basic, it was more than the Lumiere brothers did. One of Méliès's most famous films, A Trip to the Moon, used simple editing like cuts from one shot to another with the purpose of just tying one scene to another for the story. As well as being the first to use editing in his films, George Méliès was the person who created the special effect. Although in Matthew Solomon's book he states that there's a legend that the effect was discovered by accident. Méliès had three famous contributions to special effects, the first of which was the stop edit. He used this effect quite often in his films to make people or objects disappear then reappear. He made great use of this effect in his film The Vanishing Lady in 1896. Though this effect looks good for 1896, you can still see imperfections in the film. Although the stop edit is not used as much now, there are still some films that do use them. In this film, a stop edit is used to show the change in environment without cutting away. The second effect that he used was the dissolve. He used them in his films to fade from one scene to another, as well as to create the illusion that there'd been a passing of time, or to make it look like objects were changing form. One film he used this effect to great use in was The Untamable Whiskers, made in 1904, where in the film he uses dissolves to make it look like he is aging rapidly. In comparison, Apocalypse Now uses dissolves to show how the character is thinking of things that have happened in the past, and also to show the passage of time while he is in the room. The third effect that Méliès used in his films was double exposure. He used this effect in his film Indian Rubberhead in 1901 to give the appearance that he was inflating a duplicate of his own head. The effect was achieved by superimposing one piece of film over another, and it could be repeated multiple times to have a person or object on screen more than once in different ways. Double exposure is still being used to this day, but it has advanced a lot, for example in the intro to True Detective. The effect is used by double exposing establishing shots onto the silhouettes of the characters in the TV show. Although Méliès started to use editing and special effects in his films, it wasn't until Edwin S. Porter started to produce movies that editing would be used to tell a narrative by putting shots together from different angles. Porter was an American film producer and cinematographer with Edison Manufacturing Company. One of Porter's first films that used editing to tell a narrative through different shots was Life of an American Fireman in 1903, where in the film he combined shots together from different scenes to create a narrative and continuity. The shots he chose to link the sequences together flowed correctly and made sense in the story he was trying to tell to the audience, because after the alarm goes off, the firemen would rush out of bed and go to the vehicles as fast as they could. Porter also started to use camera movements in his films, like pans to follow the vehicles from one side of the screen to the other. The other film that people also remember him for was The Great Train Robbery, also made in 1903, and this film also uses editing to tell the story of a group of criminals who decided to rob a train. The editing is similar to that of Life of an American Fireman's, wherein the actions of the characters on screen match it with how you think they would be in the next scene. That was the style of editing Porter used. He connected scenes through actions to create narratives, and for this he is now considered the person who created the start of a type of editing that they call continuity editing. So, the Lumiere brothers, George Méliès and Edwin S. Porter are just a few of the early pioneers whose contributions to film, editing and special effects live on today. But now let's look a little into the future, specifically 1933. In 1933, Merian C. Cooper and Ernest B. Skotsoff created King Kong. They had special effects artist Wallace H. O'Brien make some of the best special effects and editing to bring Kong to life. The effects used were more advanced than anything that had been achieved in the past. The film used miniatures, mats, stop motion, puppetry, and rear projection to create a world where the audience believed that a giant ape could climb the Empire State Building. Even now in the 21st century, to create King Kong would still be difficult, but for it to be created so well in the 30s when there was no such thing as CGI and everything had to be practically made is astonishing. The original movie from the 30s was considered a success by audiences, with many newspaper articles writing about it. Also, multiple versions of the movie had been made. There was one made in the 1970s, another one in 2005, and the latest one in 2017. The 2005 version of King Kong was the first version to use CGI. Instead of all the effects being done practically, green screens were used and King Kong was brought to life through motion capture. The film was created by Peter Jackson, and in it he takes inspiration from the original by making his own version of the spider pit scene, but with bugs instead. But to achieve all the editing and special effects that have been shown, not only did the techniques have to advance with time, but so did the software they were made on. When films started to be made in the late 19th, early 20th century, the cameras used were bulky and not very manoeuvrable. The camera that Méliès used was called the animatograph, and to edit the footage from the camera, a work print of the original film will have been made, so the editor could make changes to the copy of the footage, so the original was not edited wrong or destroyed. Film was edited like this till 1924 when Iwan Sororia created the Moviola. It was the first machine of its kind and it let editors see the film while they were editing it. This led to them being able to make more precise cuts at the exact point they wanted it. Furthermore, it also meant that sound and video could be edited together for the first time, which changed how films were created from then on. After the Moviola, there were flatbed machines. They were bigger than the Moviola and multiple film reels could be edited at once. One of the more famous flatbed machines to be invented was called the Steenbeck. This also could edit both sound and audio, but the advantage to this machine over the Moviola was that two editors could work on it at the same time, which could increase workflow significantly. After the flatbed came the beginning of what we use today, non-linear editing systems. The first of its kind was the CMX 600 made in 1971. The CMX 600 was a very big machine that recorded black and white film onto massive disc packs. There was only ever 6 created because it cost $250,000 in 1971. But that was not the end of non-linear editing systems. In 1989, Avid 1 was created, and now 30 years on, Avid is still the go-to editing software for Hollywood. But it didn't start out as the king. There were a few issues with Avid 1, storage being the biggest one, with it only be able to hold enough footage on its optical discs for music videos or commercials. After Avid 1 was released, non-linear editing systems just kept advancing, and now in 2021, editing is very common and mostly anyone can do it. This is because of sites like Skillshare, where an individual can learn to edit without even understanding the fundamentals of editing, like continuity. It is also easier to get into editing now than it ever has been before because of the power of our phones and laptops, and with the amount of free editing software tools available to beginners. To finish off, let's talk about what might be possible in the future for the editing and special effects industry. With the equipment that's currently available, like augmented reality, virtual reality, and artificial intelligence. With the way VR is currently, it might not be impossible in the future to have a fully supported VR cinema room where everybody watches a full feature-length film through VR. Or, for artificial intelligence, what's to say that one day AI is so good that humans are not even needed to edit anymore, it's all done automatically. Whatever the case may be, editing and special effects will advance like they always have done. So much has changed in the last 120 years, and I cannot begin to imagine what editing will be like in another 120. But this video essay has looked back on some key moments of editing and special effects history, but there is much more to be explored.